Breaking news, we are learning one of the men viewed as a top contender to become Harris's running mate has taken himself out of consideration. A source telling CNN that the North Carolina governor, Roy Cooper, expressed concern about going through the vetting process at the age of 67 and about the state's lieutenant governor performing his duties if he was pulled out of the state. Jeff Zeleny is out front live from the key swing state of Michigan. So, Jeff, obviously this is a development. Some had pointed to North Carolina as, changing the map and that the governor there on the ticket could have assisted with that. But now he's making it clear that that will not happen. What are you learning about the Veep stakes tonight?
Erin, we know that this is just one more example. This is a very accelerated search process. I am told tonight that this decision could come within the week or certainly before August 7th. My colleague MJ Lee and I are reporting that the North Carolina governor is no longer in consideration, withdrawing his name. I am told because he simply was not at the top of the list. Age has been a concern, I'm told, from some in the Harris campaign. He's 67 years old. Of course, she is trying to turn the page and look toward a more vigorous campaign, a more youthful campaign, perhaps. This does not mean that North Carolina is not still a battleground state in the eyes of the Harris campaign. It absolutely is. It does not change the relationship. Sort of ironically, the governor and Vice President Harris have the longest and closest relationship, we are told, of any of the contenders on the list. They served as attorneys general together in their respective states. But look, every choice of a running mate is based on a variety of factors. It's based on comfort level, of course, but it's also based on what can help in this campaign. I'm told that extensive research is being done around Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, as well as Arizona Senator Mark Kelly, as well as potentially other people on that list. But those two are among the contenders who are getting the closest look tonight. Of course, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz has also been in the mix, and the Harris campaign has been very watching with interest at how he has been performing in what really has been sort of a rolling set of auditions. We saw that in Pennsylvania tonight as well. The governor there, Josh Shapiro, he said Vice President Harris is not only ready, she's damn ready. So he has been outperforming, really showing what a running mate could be. But, Erin, this all comes as Republicans clearly have been knocked off balance a bit by J.D. Vance and some things in his history, what he has said before. That is one of the reasons that even though this search is accelerated, I'm told that everything is being looked at very carefully, what all these candidates have potentially said, because as we know, anything that you said previously can certainly be used against you in the coming race.
Absolutely. All right, as you stand in Michigan now in the latest poll, I know tied, and obviously Biden had been down significantly there prior to that. Thanks to Jeff Zeleny. Okay, panel here. Max Rose, let me start with you. I'm just going to take a pause here and say we've really gotten a new world where now 67 is too old. I mean, I think we can just back off that a little bit here, but okay. But Roy Cooper now is out. He doesn't want to be considered. So, and you hear, we know significant vetting around Kelly from Arizona and Josh Shapiro from Pennsylvania, among possibly others. That could be Tim Walz, Pritzker, we don't know. So who do you think that she should choose?
Look, I think she needs to think about the electoral map. And Governor Shapiro stands out in that regard. Here's the interesting thing about the vice presidential decision. It's an opportunity for Kamala Harris to show her stature as the future president of the United States and to make a decision of extraordinary significance. And what everyone says who's around her, who has seen her make very important decisions, is she's going to be ruthlessly pragmatic. She's going to focus on winning, and she's going to focus on the necessity for leadership in the future. And all I've collectively heard is that she's ready to make a great decision.
I know that you've got nothing against Josh Shapiro. In fact, quite the contrary. But that brings you to a very different conclusion, Aisha.
It does. So let me just start off by saying any of these folks that are being vetted would be great vice presidents. For me, though, as a Democrat who thinks about the long-term implications of picking at our bench, we need Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania. We need Mark Kelly in the Senate from Arizona. What happens when they're gone and now we've got to replace them? I got to tell you, I'm actually Team Pete. I think that Pete Buttigieg would really invigorate the base and create a historic ticket in a way that would be impossible to beat, because the Democrats always win when we are animated and excited. And to me, having a younger, brilliant person on the ticket, who can speak about every issue, who has experience as a mayor, who can galvanize the future of the party as a gay man, who is also a parent of toddlers, fills and checks a lot of the boxes for people that we need to get off the couch and go to the polls.
And I will note, by the way, right, Mark Kelly's a senator. You have to replace him. That's a swing state. Josh Shapiro is the governor of the only split legislature in the country. So that is no guarantee of which way Pennsylvania would go. You know, Lulu, the whole situation, though, actually is amazing because there's a report in the Washington Post that J.D. Vance actually says it. He describes Harris's campaign as a, quote, sucker punch. So he's at a private fundraiser over the weekend, apparently tells donors, quote, all of us were hit with a little bit of a political sucker punch. The bad news is that Kamala Harris does not have the same baggage as Joe Biden, because whatever we might have to say, Kamala is a lot younger. And Kamala Harris is obviously not struggling in the same ways that Joe Biden did. Obviously, fundraiser are those moments where sometimes people can be a little maybe too honest. But Lulu, he's admitting there that it's a political sucker punch.
Yeah, saying the quiet part out loud, which has been something that the GOP campaign has been doing quite a lot of recently. I mean, it's the truth. What we know about this electorate is that they did not want, by and large, these two men to run against each other, Biden and former President Trump. And the teams, so to speak, that made the switch were the Democrats. And now you see Kamala Harris with a lot of enthusiasm. These numbers of enthusiasm are really important because it is going to get people off the couch. It is going to get people to, enthusiastically support the Democratic ticket. The base, certainly. And the big question is, can she bring in those voters that perhaps were on the fence? There are not that many of them, we must say, but there are some. And that's where I think the VP does really matter. I don't think the VP matters as much for former President Trump because he is the central figure of the Republican Party. He is the sun throughout which everything rotates. But I think for the Democrats, it's going to be interesting who she chooses, and who she chooses will say something about where she thinks her vulnerabilities are. Does she think that immigration is a big vulnerability? She might go for a Kelly. Is it the white working class? She might go for a Josh Shapiro. Or does she want to animate people and inspire them? Then it is indeed a Pete Buttigieg. So who she chooses will say a lot about where she thinks this campaign is headed.
You know, Scott, Trump has had a gift for coming up of nicknames with people, right? From Little Marco to Crooked Hillary that stick and somehow get at just, the one wound that you have that you didn't know till the salt was thrown on it, right? And Democrats have never been successful going the other way. Until now, they've been trying something completely different and completely unlike the Democratic Party, which is to just throw a word out there. And the word that they're throwing out there about Trump and J.D. Vance is weird. That's it, weird. Listen to this.
Some of what he and his running mate are saying, well, it's just plain weird.
These guys are just weird. That's who they are.
I mean, it's like weird what he does, right?
I mean, on the other side, they're just weird.
No matter what kind of weird stuff they keep saying.
What was weird was him joking about racism today and then talking about Diet Mountain Dew.
Okay, so they've got the talking point, Scott. They've got it. And then you chuckle, but it's the kind of word that if it sticks in people's minds can make whoever you're talking about look kind of silly and small. Are you worried about it?
No, because I think any Republican would say, I think the Democrats are weird. I mean, I think it's weird that Kamala Harris is in the process right now of trying to repudiate every single position she ever took when she ran for president. I think it's weird that they're currently engaged in massive racial segregation of all their supporters. I mean, you could go on and on and on about all the weird things that Kamala Harris is doing, all the weird things she's done. I think it's weird of these phrases she uses in her speeches all the time. So I don't think the campaign is going to be fought on who's more weird, who's seen as more weird. I think it's going to be fought on one thing, and it's going to be on who can do the best job as president. In the Wall Street Journal poll this week, Donald Trump had a 51% job approval. The Biden-Harris ticket is still down in the mid-30s. It's going to be fought on cost of living. It's going to be fought on immigration and who can make my life better. These semantics about weird and that's not the issue for swing voters. It's why is my life so expensive and why is my community unsafe and overrun with illegal immigration? That's it.
Congressman Rose, can I just ask you a question because Scott just brought something up important. The 51% approval rating for Trump. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's really amazing for Trump. That is a really high approval rating. So just take everything else out of it. Sure. She surged in the polls, her approval rate. Do you see that as something Democrats should be concerned about?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why they're going to spend an exorbitant amount of resources actually reminding the American people about what life was like under Trump. The hysteria, the constant chaos, the utter incompetency. And look, he still has, an understandable bump from what happened several weeks ago, an understandable bump from officially becoming his party's nominee. That is all going to change. There is no question that the momentum is on the vice president's side right now, and no one sees that changing for quite some time.
This is starting out to be another big week for Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. She trying to build on last week's momentum. He figuring out how to refocus his campaign on her and not Joe Biden. Both are in a race to define or be defined. In the case of Vice President Harris and the Democrats, that definition is, in a word, weird. When talking about Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. Here's Pennsylvania Governor, potential running mate Josh Shapiro, using that word about the former president at a joint appearance this evening with Michigan's Governor Gretchen Whitmer.
I have to laugh. You ever see this guy? Like when he's on a stage, he kind of meanders over, can't really walk well. And he goes over to the flag and he hugs the flag. I mean, I love the flag, but it's a weird thing he does, right?
Well, the focus on the word weird began with another possible VP pick, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, and has become the chosen Democratic definition of Donald Trump and J.D. Vance.
My observation on this is, have you ever seen the guy laugh? That seems very weird to me that an adult can go through 6.5 years of being in the public eye. If he has laughed, it's at someone, not with someone. That is weird behavior. And I don't think you call it anything else.
Every day, Vance, it comes out, Vance has done something more extreme, more weird, more erratic. Vance seems to be more erratic and more extreme than President Trump.
It demonstrates and shows us exactly what he believes in by selecting a J.D. Vance, who is quite, as the campaign said, weird, but also pretty unprepared, very scary in many respects.
I mean, on the other side, they're just weird. I mean, they really are. The things that they stand for.
Well, it's already raising questions, that word, including from New York Times columnist Thomas Friedman, who weighed in today under the headline, Democrats could regret calling Trump and his supporters weird. Quoting him now, I cannot think of a sillier, more playground, more foolish, and more counterproductive political taunt for Democrats to seize on than calling Trump and his supporters weird. As for Trump and his running mate, here's a sample of their attack lines from over the weekend.
She was a bum 3 weeks ago. She was a bum. A failed vice president in a failed administration with millions of people crossing, and she was the border czar. Now we have a new candidate to defeat the most incompetent, unpopular, and far-left vice president in American history.
The people are going to learn her record. They're going to learn that she's a radical. They're going to learn that she's basically a San Francisco liberal who wants to take San Francisco policies to the entire country.
Also over the weekend, Senator Vance, who still seems to be trying to explain why he ever started talking about childless cat ladies. Here he is on Fox last night, shortly after host Trey Gowdy, in his lead-in, said, quote, the American people are forgiving if we ask. Senator Vance did not ask.
If you look at what the left has done, they have radically taken this out of context and, in fact, aggressively lied about what I've said.
Well, keeping him honest, it doesn't seem it's being taken out of context. His remarks have been widely played here on CNN and elsewhere, showing both his use of the phrase childless cat ladies and the overall notion he seems to be trying to convey.
We're effectively run in this country via the Democrats, via our corporate oligarchs, by a bunch of childless cat ladies who are miserable at their own lives and the choices that they've made, and so they want to make the rest of the country miserable too. And it's just a basic fact. You look at Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, AOC, the entire future of the Democrats is controlled by people without children. Let's give votes to all children in this country, but let's give control over those votes to the parents of those children. When you go to the polls in this country as a parent, you should have more power. You should have more of an ability to speak your voice in our democratic republic than people who don't have kids. People will say...
Well, J.D. Vance in context, and here's the former president on Fox defending him just moments ago.
What can you say to our viewers tonight to reassure them that this was an excellent pick?
Well, first of all, he's got tremendous support. And he really does among a certain group of people that like families. I mean, he made a statement having to do with families.
Joining us now, senior political commentators Bakari Sellers, David Urban, and Ashley Allison, also former Hillary Clinton campaign manager Robbie Mook. So, Robbie, what do you make of this weird attack line the Democrats have been focusing on for J.D. Vance and Trump?
Well, I think a lot of what Donald Trump does and a lot of what J.D. Vance has been saying is indeed weird and been weird for some time. I think part of the challenge that Vance has been having is he's not really for anything at all. You know, what he said years ago about Trump was that he thought he was a Nazi. Those were his words. That's what he called him. And all of a sudden now he wants to be his vice president. And so I think Vance just doesn't have a strong bed of credibility to fall back on. All that I would say, and I know you mentioned the Friedman piece here, is that two things can be true at the same time. The Republicans can be weird. J.D. Vance can be full of it. But also as Democrats, we have to go out and say what we're for. And so, you know, I don't think this is an either or here. We really need to get out and make our case. I'm confident that the Harris campaign is going to do that in the coming days.
Bakari, do you think these comments from Vance, I mean, does it turn off independents? According to a new ABC poll, Harris's favorability rating among independent voters at 44%, which is up from only 28% a week ago. Meanwhile, Vance's overall favorability didn't change last week, although his unfavorability rating went up.
Yeah, I mean, I think what most people look at, just smart people, not anybody who's on any particular aisle or anyone who watches nightly news consistently, but most people would simply say Nikki Haley was right there. Like that was the choice for Donald Trump to make, a Nikki Haley or a Glenn Youngkin, but that would only be right. And that's not what Donald Trump did. Donald Trump went out and just doubled down on who Donald Trump is. And so, you know, when we're going through this, it's more than just, and Robbie's absolutely correct. It's more than the simple fact of J.D. Vance being weird or the things that he says being weird. In fact, I kind of want to move away from that. It's more than the history of Kamala Harris. I want to move away from that. But it's what Democrats can do for you. And the funny part about it is I hear David with this kind of cackle in the background. The funny part about that is that, you know, Republicans call names consistently. They've called her dumb. They've called her a DEI hire. They called her a bum. They called her unqualified. They called her everything but a child of God. And they're going to continue to do that. They're going to go Willie Horton. They're going to say that a black woman shouldn't be in this office. They're going to go to the underbelly of the United States of America. And I'm not saying when they go low, we go high, because when they go low, we go to hell. That's what we say in South Carolina. But when they go low, we're going to punch them in the mouth, but we're going to remind people what a future looks like under Donald Trump versus what a future looks like under Kamala Harris.
There's breaking news on the question of whether there's going to be a second presidential debate now that half of the first debate is no longer running. Just moments ago on Fox, the former president said, quote, "I'll probably end up debating Vice President Harris," adding, quote, "I think it should take place before the votes are cast." Joining us now is Sarah Longwell, political strategist, publisher of The Bulwark, and co-founder of Defending Democracy Together, whose projects include the Republican Accountability Project and Republican Voters Against Trump. So, Sarah, you've been talking to undecided swing state voters in your focus groups about Vice President Harris moving the top of the ticket. What are you hearing?
So, broadly, there's been an impression about Vice President Harris for a long time that people kind of don't know what she does. They don't see her that much. And so to the extent that she's had a negative impression prior to this, it really stems not from people knowing a lot about her, but feeling like they just don't see her and just don't know what she's all about, which means that in this moment, she's having the chance to reintroduce herself to millions of American voters and can really sort of remake her image, which is why there's a race on to define Kamala Harris. And the Trump administration wants to make sure that swing state voters hear that she is a progressive from San Francisco. That's what they want to drill into people's heads. But Kamala Harris is pivoting to the middle. She is, today she came out and said that she does not believe in a ban on fracking, does not believe in Medicare for all. And a lot of these issues are things, and actually, she talked about funding the border. These are not things or positions that she took back when she was running for president in 2020 in a Democratic primary. But I think one can argue that we see this from a lot of politicians, right? People pivot to the center in general elections. Mitt Romney certainly did it when he kind of remade himself as a moderate governor from Massachusetts to a much more conservative presidential candidate.
I mean,
when
Donald
he was
Trump did
running.
it. J.D. Vance has done it. Seems.
Donald Trump did it. I mean, look, and this is, I think, part of it. If J.D. Vance can go from saying that Donald Trump is America's Hitler to being his vice presidential candidate, I think there's some room for Kamala Harris to pivot to the center. But I do think she understands the assignment. She understands who she is trying to win over. And when you listen to these voters, they're very clear on the issues that move them and that they're interested in hearing. And so when I've done focus groups this week with swing voters, they say, hey, make me your pitch. I'm ready to hear what Kamala Harris is talking about. Because for a lot of these swing voters, they do not like Trump. They have disliked Trump now for a while. Many of them voted against him, not for Joe Biden, but against him in 2020, and then by default for Joe Biden. But they didn't want to vote for Joe Biden this time around because they felt like he was too old. And so they're giving Kamala a really hard first look.
What are
and
the
so the way that she
top
comes out,
issues?
yeah.
What are their top issues?
top
And also,
issues-
how do third-party candidates play?
Well, so number one, the top issue is always inflation in the economy. The second issue is almost always immigration. And so that there's a clear reason, I think, why she's talking about funding the border right now, because that is something that is going to be important to these sort of in the blue wall states. Immigration is still very much an issue that they are concerned about. But she's got to have a message on the economy. She's got to find a way to say, hey, look, we've had the best economic recovery of any industrialized country, but also talk to those voters who don't just want to hear good news because they're still getting hit really hard at the grocery store and at the gas pump. And I think that's where Biden was struggling as a messenger. And so that's I think where she's got to go right now. Sorry, was there a second part of your question?
Just third-party candidates.
Oh, the third party candidates, right?
Just quickly.
I mean, look, I think when you had double haters as your main persuadable group, third parties factored in a lot. She's got to eat into that margins by giving people something not just to vote against, but to vote for.
Sir Longwell, it's great talking to you. Thank you. The ABC Ipsos poll finds that most people still don't have much of a view. 66% have no opinion of Arizona Senator Mark Kelly. 70% say the same about Governor Shapiro. And 87% have no opinion about Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. Joining me now is CNN senior data reporter who has an opinion about everything, Harry Enten. So, I mean, if most adults nationally have no opinion of these possible running mates, how do they fare in their home states?
Yeah, you ever feel like you're going crazy, Anderson? I feel like I've been going crazy over the past few days with all the talk about the vice presidents, because the fact is, you look at these home states, right, and you look at how these guys did in their last election compared to the partisan baseline, how Joe Biden did back in 2020. And look at this. What do you see? You see Josh Shapiro did so much better in his last election than Joe Biden. Look at that, by 14 points. Mark Kelly did pretty good as well, 5 points. Of course, he was running for federal office, so that's, I think, a little bit of a different baseline than governor. But a lot of folks have been talking about Tim Walz. The fact is, Tim Walz may be folksy, he may be good on the trail, but when it came to the Minnesota voters who knew him best, he only did slightly better than Joe Biden did in 2020. So as you sort of focus this back out, you say to yourself, okay, if I want somebody who actually does best with the voters who know them best, Josh Shapiro, the clear runaway winner, and Mark Kelly not too far behind.
So Paul Begala was on the other night. He said he doesn't buy the whole idea of selecting a vice presidential nominee based on thinking that that person can help you win the state. Is there evidence that a VP candidate can actually help a president carry their state?
Okay, so we can go into the political science right here. We can run some models. We can look at past elections. And yes, there is. It is small. Mr. Begala is right. It is small. But if you look over time, there does, in fact, seem to be some impact. We're talking about half a point to 2 points on average. Sometimes there is that effect, of course, when you're talking about average, won't necessarily be there. But when we're talking about on average, yes, there is that impact. And more than that, it's really the only impact that we know that's measurable, the only thing that a vice president can do. And you think about these elections that we've had in this country, Anderson, they are fought by the closest of margins, right? Pennsylvania last time around was about a point. Michigan was a little less than 3 points. Wisconsin was a little bit less than a point. The fact is, elections are decided by the smallest of margins, so even a change of just half a point to 2 points could make all the difference in the world and could help somebody carry a state.
And in terms of home states with potential vice presidential nominees, I mean, Pennsylvania, Arizona would probably be the most important.
Absolutely right. If you were essentially look and say, okay, is there one state that is going to determine who wins this election? Pennsylvania is the one runaway winner. 30% of the time, it determines who ends up winning this potential 2024 election. And you combine that with the fact that Shapiro is so well liked in that state, a 61 favorable rating, the fact that he did so well in 2022. I feel like, again, I'm going crazy because folks don't seem to recognize he's the clear runaway winner if you're going to choose somebody who you actually want to help you win this election.
All right.